Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the
Booze.
Booze.
Hold on. I'm trying to get my new chair. Right. Okay. Ow. I got it.
You good over there?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
So welcome back to For the Booze.
For the Booze. That's us.
You know, it's very unfortunate because I was like, we're done talking about Cody and Satori, and then Project Fear put out like a couple episodes of them at the Conway. So now we've got these new episodes out there floating around with them. I mean, I think we're gonna have to watch it, or I don't know. I think we have to see. We have to see because...
Well, we definitely have to see whether or not we'll do an episode.
No, we're not going to do an episode on it. I'm all set with that. But I know that, like, one of the first episodes, if it is the first episode, I'm not sure, but it's like we get emotional. So I'm sure it's going to be almost like a copycat, you know, of what already happened. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I do know that they put something out that said they are in our video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But anyways, so this week we are doing a listener suggestion. I don't think we've done one of those in a while.
No, we haven't, and I am super excited.
This one comes out from a new listener. His name is, I messaged him back to ask him if I could use his whole name, but he didn't get back to me, so we're just going to, his name is Travis. So Travis, thanks for sending this in.
Yeah, thank you.
We are going back over to the East Coast in an area that we have talked about before.
Yay.
We are going to go to the wild hills of West Virginia.
West Virginia?
And we're going to visit
the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.
Why won't they stop? Help me tell them to stop.
Also, I'm pretty sure it was known as Weston State Hospital.
Really?
Was the original name. Yeah. But it's come to be now it's come to be known as the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Hospital, and I try to be PC on the show, so that is not my name for it. I'm not assuming anybody there was a lunatic. That's just the name of the place.
I think it was just one of those places where, you know.
Well, it's like insane asylum. It's just a term that's not used anymore. But,
right.
Well, I just didn't want to get any flack for it.
Out of the ordinary kind of went there, you know.
I mean, lunatic asylum, you would have probably been dropped off there.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Right behind you.
You
would have already been there for 10 years.
I would have worked there. That's probably how we would have met. But anyways, I say, you know, there's not a whole lot going on. So I would like to get into this. This is going to be a little bit of a longer story today.
All right. Well, let's do it.
Let's do this thing. Weston is the city seat of Lewis County, central West Virginia, on the West Fork River. The site was surveyed by Colonel Edward Jackson, grandfather of the American Civil War General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson. Originally named Preston, the town was founded and incorporated in 1818 as the county seat. In 1819, it was renamed Flesherville for Henry Flesher, who had provided the land for the town. The same year, the name was changed to Weston when Flesher disassociated himself from the town. During the American Civil War, it was alternately occupied by Union and Confederate troops. The discovery of oil and gas in the late 1890s stimulated population growth. Weston has iron and steel foundries, stockyards, textile plants, and a noted glass-making industry. The building that formerly housed the Weston State Hospital, also known as the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, is one of the nation's largest hand-cut stone buildings, now listed as a National Historic Landmark. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum opened its doors in 1864, just after West Virginia achieved statehood and just before the end of the Civil War. But construction continued for almost 2 decades more until the building was complete. On the outside, the Gothic and Tudor Revival architecture looks ominous and foreboding, but its early days were quite the opposite. The hospital was built according to the Kirkbride Plan, a design plan created by psychiatrist Thomas Kirkbride that incorporated light, fresh air, and nature into the building. The doorways were carefully positioned so that, when opened, sunlight would flood them. Open spaces for patients to gather to socialize and eat were plentiful, and even the grounds were landscaped in such a way that patients looking out windows would see only rolling hills and openness. Nothing that would suggest their hospital was also surrounded by gates to keep them locked inside. Art therapy and performances were part of the hospital's culture, and some patients reflected fondly on their experiences. Kirkbride believed in physical activity as a form of patient therapy, and patients were afforded privacy, comfort, and dignity. In fact, the enormous building was initially designed to house no more than 250 people at a time. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum contained its own farm and dairy, and fresh, nutritious food was available for all patients. As the author of this article, Stephanie Hubka, listened to their guide, Haley, describe how the asylum operated in its early days, they found themselves surprised to envision a calm, nurturing environment supportive of the people entrusted to its care. But life at the asylum didn't stay that way for long. Although the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was built for 250 patients, it was long before those numbers grew, with multiple beds crammed into rooms that were once cozy but quickly became crowded. As more and more people were admitted, the staff took incredible actions to house patients. In the 1950s, when the population swelled to 2,600 patients, bed-sharing measures were implemented and effectively allowed people 8 hours of rest before their beds were given to someone else. Overcrowding was, in part, due to the incredible variety of reasons people were admitted. While plenty of people suffered from mental illness, not everyone arrived for those reasons. Some were medical, such as asthma, rabies, and, of course, tuberculosis, which certainly aren't mental illnesses. Others were even stranger. Wives who were insubordinate to their husbands, indigestion, doubting one's ancestry, political and religious excitement, and being kicked in the head by a horse were also reasons you'd find yourself at the hospital. Now, a man could admit his wife for just about any reason, and if he decided to never bring her home, she would remain as a ward of the state. Children often accompanied their mothers, and some children were even born within the hospital's walls and were raised there. Other children were dropped off in front of the hospital as orphans. A big part of the hospital's history was written by people who should have never been there in the first place. Kirkbride's belief that those who suffered from mental illness should be holistically cared for did not govern the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum long enough. Controversial therapies, medications, and treatments altered the lives of patients, and not always in a productive manner. Chlorpromazine, also known as thorazine, was introduced to treat psychotic disorders, but it was widely prescribed and often used to keep patients in a catatonic state. Similarly, laudanum, an opiate most used to treat pain, was regularly provided to patients. Insulin shock therapy, which placed patients in comas, and shock treatment were also frequently used by the staff. Of the medical treatments used at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, lobotomies were among the most common. Lobotomies were regularly used to treat mental disorders because they interrupted the neural connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex, which ultimately stole the patient's personality and left them without effect. Patients at the asylum underwent transorbital lobotomies, crudely known as ice pick lobotomies, which involved the insertion of an ice pick-like instrument into the eye socket until it connected with brain tissue. Dr. Walter Freeman popularized the procedure and brought it to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, where he conducted lobotomies for $25 per patient and encouraged crowds to watch as if it were a theatrical presentation. As the asylum declined, hundreds of patients suffered at the hands of overworked staff in an overcrowded building. Plenty of patients also suffered at each other's hands, too. In a room toward the back of one wing, tour guide Haley pointed toward the ceiling as she told a group about an inmate who was murdered by two others. When an attempt to hang him had failed, the men placed his head under a bed frame and jumped on it until the bed frame eventually touched the floor. Other patients were also murdered by their peers, aggravated by situations where mental illness, overcrowding, and poor care became a lethal combination. Asylum staff were empowered to send patients to isolation if the patients were uncontrollable, and, in some cases, even if they weren't. Some patients were kept in solitary confinement for days and even weeks at a time. The isolation was so detestable that one inmate in particular, a former boxer who suffered from injuries that rendered him emotionless and occasionally violent, attempted to beat down the metal door that enclosed behind him when he was placed in a solitary cell. He ripped one door off its hinges and left visible dents in the other door. When the door was opened, he handed the door he had destroyed to the nurse calmly and returned to his room. While some people eventually left the asylum under their own power, many eventually died there. The staff notified next of kin when a patient passed away, and in many cases, families did not return to identify or take the bodies for burial. Patients who were not claimed by their families were assigned a number, buried in the cemetery, and issued a simple gravestone reflecting only their identification number. Over time, many of the gravestones were removed and even repurposed. Today, there is virtually no way to identify the bodies buried in the asylum. Patients were also always buried, and they were never cremated. In 1960, a medical center, which included a morgue, was built. In 1985, the Charleston Gazette exposed the asylum, reporting that court-appointed inspectors found the asylum to be, quote, dirty and unkempt, with many patients left naked and, quote, confined to dirty wards with bathrooms smeared with feces. September of 1992 was also a very bad year for the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Overcrowding, poor conditions, and staff issues had led to a call for the hospital to be closed by 1996, and construction on a new state hospital nearby was already in the works. These problems were intensified when two suspicious deaths happened within a month of each other. The following article is from the 29 September 1992 issue of the Charleston Gazette newspaper. Headline: Weston patient dies after fight. Second death within a month. By Don Miller, staff writer. A patient at the West State Hospital died Sunday night after a fight with another patient who was charged with murder 5 years ago, according to state police in Lewis County. This was the second death at the mental hospital within a month. George Edward Bodie, 46, of Parkersburg, received several injuries during a late-night fight and died, apparently as a result of those injuries, said Sergeant B.B. Flanagan of the Weston Detachment of the State Police. There were no weapons involved in the fight, he said. According to police, David Michael Mason, 29, of Moundsville, also a patient of the mental hospital, tried to choke Bodie with his hands during a fight at about 11:30 p.m. on the third-floor ward. Charges against Mason were pending until an autopsy was done and police talked to the Lewis County prosecutor, said Trooper R.W. Heyer of the Sutton Detachment. In 1987, Mason and another man were charged with first-degree murder in the death of Dean Metheny, 49, and with the malicious wounding of Raymond Diller at the same time. They were declared incompetent to stand trial in 1988. Dr. Carol Boyd, a medical examiner in Morgantown, examined the body, but would not answer questions Tuesday afternoon, a secretary said. Heyer said he had talked to Mason, but still didn't know what the fight was about or how it started. Mason remained at the mental hospital and was being watched Sunday night, Heyer said. Quote,
I'm not so sure it was too much of a fight, really.
Heyer said. Quote,
There was a struggle, but they weren't standing fist to fist fighting.
Weston administrator Rain Valdov did not return phone calls to his office Monday. Earlier this month, a guard found the badly decomposed body of Brian Scott B., a 21-year-old patient who had disappeared 8 days before. Authorities at the time suspected the death was a suicide. In September 1987, another patient at the 250-bed hospital was killed. Mental health advocate David Geddes said he and his consumer group are concerned about so many deaths.
Quote, What does the state plan to do about this?
Said Geddes, director of the West Virginia Mental Health Consumers Association. That group planned to meet today with Dawn Weston, State Secretary for Health and Human Resources. The state has been arguing with mental health advocates and lawyers for years over whether to rebuild the Weston facility, a 19th century building that is under court order to close by 1996. The state is continuing with plans to build a new central mental health hospital, a major employer in the Lewis County, although a court ruled that the hospital should be replaced with a network of community facilities. The practices of the hospital went on for far too long, treating or rather torturing patients in the facility for more than 100 years. While we do find stories of deaths in our research, these are far from all cases throughout the years, so we encourage you to read up on this location yourself. There are many stories throughout history of our long-traveled path to modern medicine, but not many rival the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. It's a fantasy destination for most modern-day paranormal enthusiasts, and unfortunately, a final destination for patients who had to endure the torture of this malevolent hospital. Now, while you can visit for the day, it isn't hard to imagine that there are souls that will never be able to escape one of the world's most notorious asylums.
Wow. We do these kinds of places. We've done quite a few of these kinds of places.
Yeah, we've done a lot of them.
And
Kirkbride. I was so excited when I started researching and I saw Kirkbride. We've done other Kirkbride buildings.
I know. And it seems that this guy has his hand in a lot of different insane and crazy places. I know we've brought it up before, but this, I don't know. I know you didn't get as in depth in here on the medical practices, quote unquote.
You know, I was going to, but if you're a listener of the show and you go back, we've actually talked about every one of these practices already.
Yep.
Actually, a good episode, if you want to hear exactly what these are about, go back and listen to the Taunton State Hospital episode. Because there was a lot of parallels between this and the Taunton State Hospital episode. But it seems to me almost like if the name Kirkbride is attached to these buildings, it's haunted. Bad stuff happened there.
It's crazy because he's come up so much in a lot of these places that we've done.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a popular architectural plan of the time, but it just, I mean, there were other architectures, but it just seems like every one of them that has the name Kirkbride attached to it are just historically known as the most haunted places that you can travel to.
Yeah. And like I was saying before you even started, like people just got dropped off here for anything.
Yeah. Like a woman like you, as much as you talk back, you could have just went right in.
Yeah. Well, different times.
And then I could have just left
different
you there.
Times.
The leverage.
Aren't you so lucky?
I would never do that. Come on. I like your sassy demeanor. But
me? No.
Now, anybody who wants to be offended about my southern accent, come at me. I grew up in the South, so I'm ready.
Yes, we did.
But I mean, this this isn't like this is a well-known place. I didn't really feel like I needed to go in too hard on the practices so much as like the history that brought us there and what happened in the end, because those were actually things I didn't know a lot about.
Right.
I never knew that the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was so chill and peaceful at one point. I would have just assumed it was always a hellscape.
Right. Like the bricked up, boarded up kind of buildings that we've covered before.
And they even say, like, as foreboding as it may have looked, once you got in there, it was like a blissful kind of place. Like, people were happy to be there, which is not something that we ever come across.
It really isn't. And because of the torture, medical practices at the time, a lot of these other places focus more on that kind of thing, I feel. And this one was actually more trying to make it a tranquil and peaceful place to be.
I think a lot of them thought that's what they were doing, to be honest. I just don't think they did a very good job at it.
No.
Because I really do think that, like, they really thought that they were killing it. Sorry about the pun. But,
wah, wah, wah.
but they just, as time went on, like, I think I've said this before, like, we can look back with, rose tinted glasses and be like, it was nice, it was bad, but we have the benefit of hindsight, right? Like, we know that in the modern day, that stuff is viewed as barbaric, but at the time, it was the medical practice. They weren't really doing anything that was looked down upon by society. Eventually it did. Like, this is, from what I gathered from this is the birthing place of the lobotomy.
Oh.
This is like where they discovered it, and then they were like, do it here.
That's crazy. Because like to what you were saying, we have the medical practices that we have now. How do we think we got there?
Well, yeah.
It's by trial and error, and it started out really bad.
It was a long and arduous road for sure. But yeah.
These poor people.
Lobotomies basically started here. And the thing that I think is crazy to think about, especially for a lot of you younger people, is there are people alive today that had lobotomies. And there are some, I can't remember his name, and I might have brought this up in a previous episode, but I remember coming across a video of a guy who was at one of these asylums as a young kid, and they gave him a lobotomy. But he has somehow, like, regained himself back.
Wow.
But that's like just like, you just never know. Like, your next door neighbor could be some old timer who seems a little off, but he could have had a lobotomy, or she could have had a lobotomy. These people have still survived today, but a lot of people didn't. A lot of people went in because they're literally. Have you ever watched a video of a lobotomy?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, where they. Oh man,
yeah,
they're just like tink, tink, tink. And
no, stop.
It is. Stop. It's like not the grossest thing you'll ever see, but knowing what they're doing
is very unnerving.
It makes your skin crawl.
Ugh.
Right, because above and beyond, like, all right, so insulin shock therapy, they were trying to see what health benefits, like, these, insulin had, or the laudanum, and, like, I'm sure they abused it, but at the time it was cutting edge medical practices. But I don't know, like, to me, I couldn't imagine there being a time in history where you'll shove the ice pick up a dude's eye socket and crank it with a hammer a few times could ever been like, yeah, this is good. Yeah, no, this is good. This is working. So you just, it's crazy. But I try to look at it like that. Like, this is how we got to where we are today. We couldn't be here without that.
Yeah, I feel bad for the kids. Really, the kids who were either born there or just dropped off there, and basically they just stayed until it closed. Like,
there
what?
is a spirit that you're going to get to talk about, and maybe it wasn't all bad for the children.
Okay.
Maybe it just wasn't all bad. So I'm not sure what they were ever thinking, but we'll come back at, after an ad break, and we'll talk about what's going on there today.
And now, Booze Crew, back to the show. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia, aka Weston State Hospital, is over 150 years old. During that incredible span of time, Trans-Allegheny has been a sanctuary for the mentally ill. The subject of Civil War raids and even a gold robbery. It's a grand library now and a National Historic Landmark for the stories it holds, with more being created every day. The massive structure watches over an otherwise unassuming West Virginia town. While the stone building is imposing, it is not at all threatening. A manicured lawn and a sparkling fountain welcome you upon approach. And as you stroll the grounds, you'd never know from the outside that the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was once home to some of the most shocking and inhumane medical procedures imaginable. While the asylum is now infamous for its crude and barbaric medical practices, it was actually constructed with the intent of being a safe haven for society's unwanted. An environment where patients suffering from insanity, previously regarded as incurable, could potentially be treated instead of literally chained to the walls in a prison. Staff guests and multiple celebrity ghost hunters have reported experiencing paranormal activity. They've allegedly seen apparitions, heard inexplicable sounds or voices, and have even been touched or shoved. The frequency of the reports has earned the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum the honor of being named one of the most haunted places in America. You can see for yourself on one of the hospital's paranormal tours if you dare. There are 8-hour public and private paranormal tours, nighttime tours, daytime tours, and flashlight tours, or even overnight ghost hunts. Many skeptics and believers alike come to see if they can spot some of the famous ghosts that supposedly roam the halls of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Some of the most well-known spirits are Little Lily, Dean, Big Jim, David Mason, and Slewfoot. Little Lily is one of the most well-known ghosts. This is one of the most prominent versions of Gladys and Lily's story. Gladys was sent to the asylum when she was supposedly raped by a Civil War soldier, and when she was admitted, she found herself pregnant. Gladys passed during childbirth, leaving her infant left alone. The nurses in the ward immediately took to the little girl, naming her Lily. According to legend, the child only had one home for a very short period of time. When Lily was 9, she contracted pneumonia, which ultimately caused her death at such a young age. Now, people like to visit Lily's room and bring her things like toys, stuffed animals, and candy. Many people state that the toys will sometimes move, and the candy will even sometimes allegedly disappear. Many believe this is Lily's way of playing with the guests. Big Jim and David Mason brutally murdered Dean. Both murderers were criminally insane and included in the asylum's top 10 most dangerous men. The two inmates repeatedly tried to hang Dean, but had little success. One day, Dean's luck would run out. They forced Dean's head down under the bedpost, then jumped on the bed repeatedly until the frame eventually hit the floor, killing him. Dean is known to be a quiet spirit. He has spoken a few times, but any time the shadows of Big Jim and David come around, he seems to disappear. It is said that when these two shadows show up, the energy in the room changes, causing some people to feel ill and uncomfortable. No one really knows how the man known as Slewfoot got his nickname. Supposedly, he roamed the upper floors and killed and tortured people in the upstairs bathroom. To this day, he haunts the bathroom and the upstairs floor. On the first floor, there was a female patient named Ruth. She resided in the Civil War wing with the veterans. According to her legend, she hated men with an unbelievable rage. To this day, some people say that she will throw things at men if given the chance. The asylum was opened during the Civil War. When the war ended, many soldiers were admitted into the hospital. They were put in a wing that was called the Civil War Wing. Most of them ended up dying in the hospital, cursed to haunt the halls forever. Although not being specified as being from the Civil War in all sources, there is a ghost named Jacob who is believed to be haunting the halls of the fourth floor. There is not a lot known about Nurse Elizabeth. It is said that she went from floor to floor, taking care of the patients in need. No one knows what happened to her, but she roams the halls with the other ex-residents of the hospital. There is also the spirit of James. There isn't much to say about James, since the man managed to stay out of trouble, but it is said that he died from a heart attack in one of the upstairs bathtubs. These are just a few of the multiple souls that are lost in the halls of this historic hospital. It's a tragedy what happened to them. Back in the 19th and early 20th centuries, people would be admitted to asylums simply for seeming to be a bit off. The list for admittance was completely outrageous. Some people were put there who didn't deserve to suffer such a horrible treatment. I spent the night in a haunted asylum, and I still can't explain what I saw. A mysterious flashlight, tales of murder, and other experiences at one of the region's most haunted destinations. Written by Marissa M. Cascino. I rolled into Weston, West Virginia, as the sun began to sink, making the lush Appalachian hills appear to glow. A century and a half ago, the area's beauty appealed to social reforms convinced of the healing powers of fresh air and rural landscapes. But even against the bucolic backdrop, the Gothic-style mental hospital they built here looks like a figment of Stephen King's imagination come to life. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, now widely considered one of the most haunted destinations in America, operated from 1864 to 1994. Although it was designed for 250 patients, about 2,400 crammed in, which gave me pause when I arrived for my overnight ghost hunt. Was I exploiting their suffering, or was I validating it? After all, it seemed few cared about their pain while they were alive. Just in case, I said a silent apology to any ghosts offended by my presence. The current owner launched the ghost tours to raise money for ongoing restoration. There's a 90-minute daytime tour, $35, a 2-hour nighttime tour, $40, and the most intense option, the one I chose, a 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. hunt, $100. I expected to be joined by hardcore paranormal investigators, weighed down with camera gear and digital recorders, and there were some. But there was also a preppy older couple, a mom chaperoning tween girls, and a grandma from Indiana named Julia. and her skeptical son-in-law. We broke into smaller groups, spending 2 hours on each of the asylum's floors before rotating. Our guide told us about some of the hospital's better-known spirits, including a little girl named Lily, who was born in the asylum, a man named Jesse, who died of a heart attack in a bathtub, Civil War soldiers, and a patient who was brutally murdered by his roommates. On each floor, she gave us the layout of the land before turning us loose to explore. The hospital is so vast that it was easy to end up alone, despite the dozens of other people wandering around. It was also easy to feel lost amid the maze of hallways and patient rooms covered in peeling paint. Julia and I set up in a room allegedly haunted by a spirit named Jim James. We placed a mag light on the floor and asked Jim to turn it on. The light was Julia's, but I inspected it, and it seemed totally ordinary. A few beats passed, then it came on, by itself. I offered Jim a cigarette to turn it back off. It went dark. I don't smoke, but our tour guide gave me a couple of cigarettes because she said some of the spirits liked them. We tried the flashlight trick again, in a room where Lily supposedly plays, in a pitch-black corridor once reserved for violent women, in a lobotomy recovery area without luck. Even so, exploring the crumbling building and learning its history were plenty thrilling, ghosts or no ghosts. By 4:30 a.m., I was ready to go. As I drove away, I thought about whether I actually believe. I've always been fascinated by ghosts, but am I convinced they exist? Honestly, no. Maybe Jim James did turn on that flashlight, or maybe there's some mechanical explanation. I just don't know. And what's more exciting than the unknowable? While there are tons of written articles and YouTube videos around the internet claiming to prove the existence of spirits at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, what do everyday people visiting the hospital think? We, of course, went to the internet to find out. And this is what we found. Bill A. 6401DU from TripAdvisor says, quote,
"Our overnight ghost tour was absolutely awesome. I can tell you with absolute certainty that that place is haunted as hell. Great, knowledgeable tour guides. Ours was Ryan. Great guy. If you go, you will not be disappointed."
Unjust 304 from TripAdvisor writes, quote,
"The overnight ghost haunt experience was phenomenal. We caught many EVPs and photos, and the energy that exists in these buildings is unmatched to any other paranormal energy that I have experienced."
Tiffany B. from TripAdvisor writes, quote, "Learning how far mental health has come and how nice and knowledgeable my tour guide was. This was my second time here. This time, brought a different friend for her birthday. I was happy when I saw my guide, Alyssa, again. When I come back, I hope I would have her again. Also, the paranormal activity today was great." And one more from 627273772 from TripAdvisor, quote,
"My boyfriend and I stayed the night in the forensic, medical, and geriatric building. We had so many experiences with paranormal activity. We had Brad as our tour guide, and he was very interactive with us and even did some ghost sessions with us. We also had Brad for our daytime historic tour, and he was nothing but amazing. He was very knowledgeable of the asylum and did a great job sharing his information with our group. We will definitely be returning in the future.
In a building brimming with stories of torture, neglect, and desperation, it's no wonder tales of ghosts running wild are part of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum's rich history. While the hospital offers overnight paranormal tours that provide the best chance a visitor can have for encountering a ghost, you don't need to visit after dark to feel like a spirit might be right in front of you. Guides and visitors say ghosts have revealed themselves in a number of ways, including slamming doors, screaming, and appearing as lights or orbs. So stay aware for strange or unexplained sights and noises. Or, at the very least, don't be surprised if some of the elements work their way into your trip and hopefully don't follow you home.
So that is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And like we've already said, like, we're just covering bits and pieces. There's no way we'd be able to cover the entire history of this place all in one podcast. So
No, this is a big place. This is a big one.
yeah. So when you go and if you read the description of the show, I don't know who does. I know a lot of people don't, but we actually do cite everything that we put in the show.
Yes.
And some of these articles, especially the one from the Stephanie Hubka from my story, that article was so well written that I encourage everybody to go listen. It was really good. Like, I would have read it without doing this.
Yay.
It was a
awesome.
really good article.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, it was a great article. Some of these articles were just amazing. So it's worth looking up on, especially like if you're interested in how we got it, to where we are today. And this place has probably some of the most numerous accounts of paranormal activity than anywhere we've ever covered.
There are so many people, places, shows, just so many people go to this place.
Yes, but be wary about who you watch too, though, because they do make some stuff up.
As always, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's... I think one day we're just going to have to, like, do this broad, like, coverage of what we think about YouTube. And we're going to be on there soon, so
Yeah.
great.
Yay!
But anyway, like, we actually have some EVPs to listen to today. Quite a few, actually. I don't know how many of these we're going to listen to, but we've got a lot.
Yes.
And the first one that we're going to go in with here is, and I made sure that these were not on TikTok this time.
Oh, good.
We've
had a couple good ones, but all the rest have been like, wah, wah, wah.
The problem with TikTok is, and like I do it to our TikToks too, like you put music in and stuff to make them more interesting and make them yours. But with evidence like ghost evidence, it's really hard to do that because then you just end up, you can't hear anything.
Kind of washing out your evidence.
Yeah, so it ends up sucking. But this is from an account called Woodsman. It's just Woodsman. WOODSMON. And it just says EVP at Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.
Okay.
So there's not a lot to this one.
Well, let's figure it out.
Yeah, so let's see what they got to say.
Were you a nurse here? Were you an orderly here? Were you an administrator? Can you make those bars go all the way out the other way? Thank you.
Same video. This is in another room. Same night.
We just sat in here and what happened? Still got faults in it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So that one kind of caught me off guard. You're not going to hear it this way, listeners, but it kind of just jumps in halfway through. Okay, so from what I understand of this video, it sounds like maybe two women are doing EVPs, and you kind of hear this off in the distance,
Like a
voice,
male voice.
and that's what we're listening to.
Yeah.
Apparently, from what the video says, is that they didn't hear anything when they were recording it.
Yeah,
Nothing.
that was from their playback, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
they only noticed it during their playback. So that was a pretty good one to start off.
Yeah. And that last one, that was that wah, wah, wah,
Yeah,
that was weird.
There's no way I would play it. I'll just boost the audio when we edit this. I don't want to play it again. It's so overly reverberated and where they are that there's no way we're going to understand it, but there definitely is something there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this one is Craig M. I mean, show these people some love. They have like hardly any subscribers or anything, so make sure you go check out their videos. And it just says, Moaning Voice EVP, Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This is one of the best EVPs that I've gotten to date. The EVP sounds as if the person is moaning or crying in the words being spoken.
Oh.
So let's see what this one sounds like.
All right.
Is there a piano or something around here?
Here, but came from there or from here.
Okay.
Whoa.
Dude, that was creepy.
Whoa. Oh.
Whoa.
I feel like in the very beginning there was
There
like
was something.
a small little something.
Yeah, way off in the distance.
And that was kind of what they were talking about. Like
I
the
think
investigators.
I think they actually heard that in person.
The first one. And
that-
I don't know about the second because it was right there at the end. But wow, that was weird.
Very creepy. It was very, like they said, very moany sounding.
Yeah, it was ominous.
Yeah, weird. This next one is this is by Richard D. Laudenslager. That is a name. That is a name. But let's see what he captures.
I don't know what she's saying, but I can definitely hear a voice.
I can also hear it. He thinks that he knows what she is saying.
Okay.
He's got it like boosted in this one section. So let's go back into this because I hear it, but I don't know what I hear.
Right.
So let's see what he thinks it is.
It almost sounds like she's singing.
Okay, so let me see. He thinks it says, "Yes, I am." I'm going to be honest. I don't know what I hear there. I'm not going to pretend like I hear something that I'm not sure of.
I feel like the last word almost sounds like home or something, but maybe it's just the echo that's in all of these because this is a ginormous place.
I am so unsure about what I'm hearing that I couldn't even begin to even throw out a guess. Like, it's just, to me, it sounds like...
Say, to me, it sounds something like, I don't know, like, no way home. Like the way she kind of says it.
I guess I could hear that now that you said it like that.
Yeah.
But that could be pareidolia now that you said it.
I know.
But anyways, there are many more EVPs. It's a very well-known place. A billion people have been to. But this is the time that I have to ask you, Megan.
Is it real?
What do you think about the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum?
Well, as paranormal watchers ourselves, we watch a lot of paranormal stuff. We have seen a lot of people go to this place.
Oh, yeah.
And now that we have delved a little more into the history and seen a little more accounts from other people, I will have to go with my original feeling when you first told me what we were doing, and that is yes.
Okay.
I do believe that this place is haunted.
That is a resounding yes.
As most asylums tend to be. And especially since we got our little homie over here building all these crazy places.
Mr. Kirkland is
That are-
now homie to For the Booze podcast.
Yeah, he's our little
I wonder if we could get
haunted home builder.
I wonder if we could get like a portrait of him and put it up here. That'd be
oh my God, we have to do it.
That would be kind of cool.
We have to do it. Okay. But yes, absolutely. I do. So what about you, babe?
I absolutely, yeah, I think there's something going on here.
Okay.
This is one of those few places where I put my skepticism aside. And basically for me, it's more along the belief line of like, I don't know what causes paranormal, but I think that this is probably what it would be. Like people, this is another one of those places people were just tortured constantly. Mm-hmm. And then you mix in like, not everybody there was mentally ill, but a lot of them were. You got their feelings and stuff that they felt being trapped there. Imagine
basically.
being maybe somebody with a disability who couldn't really speak for themselves and wasn't mentally ill, and they were just being tortured every day. So to me, this is just, it's the perfect combination of emotions and stuff like that could definitely cause something. So that means that the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is going to get
the big old seal of approval.
And yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah.
Now I got to go figure out what we're doing for next week. So why don't you tell them where they can find us?
Well, I'm going to slip in my southern accent here one more time. Okay. And they can find us on Instagram at forthebooze_podcast and on Facebook at forthebooze.
That's right. Y'all can also find us over on the old Twitter X at, For the Booze, or you can find us on YouTube at For the Booze. And don't forget, we're going to be doing some videos soon. And don't forget, listener suggestions and listener stories, go ahead and send them in to forthebooze12@gmail.com. And don't forget, 5 stars, rate and review anywhere you listen to your podcast. You might not think it helps, but man, it helps. And I know I ask every week. I'm going to keep asking every week.
It really helps, y'all.
It really does.
It does.
Really, really does. But I think we should get out of here.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much for listening. And we will see you in the next one.
Bye. Gotta go.